Do you believe that we have set some sort of a precedent that the United States is willing to engage in a prisoner swap with our terrorist enemies?
I don't think there's any doubt about that. I mean, people noticed it. Our enemies have noticed it. And we said at the time that that swap in and of itself would now put a price tag on the head of every American abroad. And in fact, ISIL, even as we speak, is actively looking for more Westerners to kidnap, particularly Americans, because they can either butcher them in these horrifying videos that we keep seeing, and it's a propaganda win for them among radical jihadists, or hopefully in their mind they think they can get a trade or money on their behalf. So there's no doubt in my mind that prisoner swap has created that incentive.
Let's talk about this AUMF, the Authorization for Use of Military Force. Both parties have been pressing for a new one of these. We had one before we went to war in Afghanistan and Iraq, but both parties are saying we need a new one because that one doesn't really apply to the battle we're now fighting. Now the White House is coming back. They're going to present it to Congress tomorrow. As a member of the Senate Foreign Relations Committee, your committee is key on this. The White House has been getting hit for making it too restricted, making it too limiting in what a commander-in-chief can actually do, either this one or the one that's going to follow Barack Obama. Where do you stand on it?
Well, I think we need to authorize not just the use of force, we need to authorize to defeat ISIL, and it continues to develop. Now, what the president needs to come up with is a strategy militarily to defeat them, which I think involves, for example, an anti-ISIL ground force made up of Arab armies, combined with U.S. Special Forces, particularly for tactical support, an increase in the airstrikes. But we need to authorize the use of force, but more importantly, we need to authorize the use of force sufficient to defeat them, to destroy them.
Now, Senator Rand Paul has come out on the record and said that he would oppose any AUMF that doesn't have geographic limits because he thinks then we could have somebody expand this to, well, now we're going to go bomb Saudi Arabia because we think they fall within the definition of what this authorization provides. Do you agree with him?
Well, think about it this way. If you put a geographic limit on the authorization of use of force, you've basically told ISIL where they can go to hide. If you say, for example, you can only hit them in Iraq and Syria, they have every incentive now to move their operations and their training facilities to some other place that's not included within it. We need to understand what's the goal here. The goal here is to defeat ISIL. And if your goal is to defeat them, your goal is to defeat them no matter how long it takes or how many places you have to go after them.
Do you think this AUMF that's going to get submitted tomorrow is going to go through, is going to pass?
Well, we need to see the details of it. As I said, I hope that it is an authorization sufficient that allows us to win, to defeat ISIL. And I think when you limit it geographically, when you limit it with time constraints, you're basically telling the enemy, we're going to fight you for 5 years, and if in 5 years we haven't succeeded, then we're going to stop. Or we're not going to hit you if you move to Libya or if you move to Afghanistan. I don't think that's going to work. For our objective here is to defeat this very dangerous group.
Let's talk about Iran for a minute because there's news on that. Just yesterday, Secretary Kerry suggested that this March deadline we have to reach a deal with the Iranians or we're going to have sanctions come out of the U.S. Congress is real, that he can't see that deadline being extended. But then today at the State Department, Jen Psaki said, well, we've never said deadline. It's really just been more of a goal. Do you think that our government is serious about this March deadline on Iran?
I think that the Iranians believe that Barack Obama and John Kerry are desperate for a deal, and I think they sense it in our body language and words such as these and statements they've made in the past, and the fact that they're fighting their own Congress on giving them the authority to impose additional sanctions if the talks fail. And the Iranians are taking advantage of it. For example, one of the issues that's not even on the table, and it should have been on the table, is their missiles and their rocket systems that they're developing.
Right.
The only reason why you develop long-range rockets is to put a nuclear warhead on it, and that has completely been untouched in these negotiations.
So what's this about for Barack Obama? I mean, because his critics say, oh, this is just political cover. He just wants to, say, oh, I'm the one who got the deal with Iran. But that is very cynical. I mean, you have to be very cynical to think, given, the existential threat to Israel, that's his out clause.
Well, listen, I have no doubt that he would want Iran to abandon its nuclear program, and he thinks that if he can get a deal that delays it by 5 years, that's a good thing. But I think driving a lot of this is domestic politics, the ability to say at the end of his term that he was the one that got this deal done, that it was an achievement. And a future president was the one that lost that achievement, but at least he achieved it. There's no doubt that that is part of their checklist as they try to build a legacy. Unfortunately, I think it leaves this country in a very dangerous position, and our strongest ally in the Middle East, Israel, in an even more dangerous position.
Finally, I want to ask you this. David Axelrod was on Fox News last night and was asked about President Obama's recent comments at the National Prayer Breakfast, talking about how Christians back in the Crusades also committed horrible deeds, so don't get on your high horse when condemning radical Islamic terrorists. His answer to Bill O'Reilly was, well, he was just being provocative. That's what the president was doing, being provocative. Your thoughts on the president choosing the National Prayer Breakfast for that kind of a message?
Well, first of all, I think he's developed this habit of scolding and nagging and talking down to the American people, and I think that's a very dangerous attribute for a president to have. It's very divisive, quite frankly, I think annoying after some time. But I think to compare 21st century jihadists to 11th century medieval era Christians is absurd. This is a reality that's happening right now. None of the people involved in the Crusades are alive today or doing anything to anyone. It happened. It's a historical issue that happened a long time ago. And for him to act, here's the thing, this was not an off-the-cuff remark. It was a written, scripted statement. He knew exactly what he was doing. He wanted to be provocative, and I think there are people on the left that think that sort of statement is very appealing. I don't.
Senator Marco Rubio, great to see you, sir. Thanks for being here tonight.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.